Hi guys, today we're going to talk about the Flammacue and the myth surrounding it. So the myth is that the Flammacue is the only American rudiment. And over the last 20-25 years I've heard this a lot. The earliest place I've ever seen reference to it written down is John Wooten's Rudimental Reference of 1992, and sorry John, but that's just not true. I don't know where he got it from. I'm pretty sure he didn't make that up, but if he did, he's confused, and if he heard it from someone else, the person he heard it from is confused and he just repeated it. But someone's confused because not only is it not the only American rudiment, I think there may be up to 16 American rudiments on our standard normal PAS 40. Not talking hybrids, not talking anything strange or outside the box. The normal rudiment sheet that we've all seen, almost half of those are American. And even if I'm wrong about a couple of them, it's way more than one. So let's talk about which ones I think are American. First of all, let's talk about the Flammacue. It is American. It was invented during the Civil War era. It was first published by George Bruce, whose real name is George Barrett, which is a different video. But it is American. I don't see it showing up in any other cultures or traditions except in reference to the American PAS 40. So there you go. It is American, it's just not the only one. Some other low-hanging fruit includes the Dragadiddle and the Flamdrag. They're both hybrid rudiments in that they combine two rudiments that were never traditionally stuck together. And the Dragadiddle was reportedly invented by a guy from Pennsylvania in the 1970s, I think. So it's definitely also American. The Flamdrag, I don't know exactly who or where that was invented by, from, with, but it shows up right around the same period, and the PAS 40 is really the first time it was widely distributed, so I think that's also American. So the myth, though, may have actually been about the Nard 26, so that doesn't include the Dragadiddle or the Flamdrag, and it does include the Flammacue, so you could be forgiven for maybe thinking that, oh, we didn't mean the 40, we meant the 26, and that's why the Flammacue is the only American rudiment. But I can tell you that that's probably also still not true. So one rudiment that is on the Nard 26, and that is really ubiquitous, but I think it probably is American, is the paradiddle, the regular single paradiddle. The first time it ever shows up in print is in America, in an American book by an American author during the American Revolution. Now there's a theory, or there's postulation out there that it may have come from Britain because of course we were a colony and we didn't invent all of our drumming. A whole bunch of it does come from Britain. And so they think that we absorbed it from them, but there is actually no written record of an actual single paradiddle in British drumming before we used it. The first time it shows up is actually after we printed it, so it seems like they got it from us. And if even that's not true, it might be true that things like the Flam paradiddle diddle or the Drag paradiddle number 2 are American. So again, Nard 26 standard rudiments, but even if we didn't invent the first paradiddle, we certainly, or almost certainly, invented several of the iterations of it. The triple paradiddle is another one, not a Nard 26 rudiment, but is an iteration that first pops up in an American book many years later, and thus a whole bunch of the paradiddles are probably American. Quite honestly, it's easier to understand which paradiddle variations are American by telling you the two that are not. There are 10 on the PAS 40, so it's like a quarter of all of the PAS rudiments are paradiddle variations, and 2 of them are definitely not American. The Drag paradiddle number 1 comes from Britain, and it's published there before it's published here. And the single flammed mill, which is like a flammed backwards paradiddle, that's a Swiss thing. The other 8, probably American, and even if you believe that maybe the single paradiddle or even the single and double paradiddle were British, there's still maybe 6 variations that are American, so a whole bunch that are not Flammacues that are American. So basically the same story can be said about the Rattamaqueue. The first Rattamaqueue was published in the United States, and we may have gotten it from Britain, but that's just a theory because there's no written evidence. And so even if we did get the single Rattamaqueue from the British, the double Rattamaqueue and the triple Rattamaqueue are probably American. And even if we maybe got the double Rattamaqueue, the triple Rattamaqueue shows up 50 years later. I'm pretty sure it's an American rudiment. So one, if not all 3 of the Rattamaqueues also invented in America, and they show up here first, so it is just a theory that they're British. The proof says that they're American. So if I'm right about all of those, that adds up to about 13 rudiments. There are a few more that maybe you could consider American and maybe not, but we're going to talk about them anyway. One of them is the single stroke 7. So that first shows up in American books in the 1860s, and it shows up in French books, of course under a different name, in like 1870. It's kind of a weird thing because there is no single stroke and then a number tradition in American playing. The French have like a single stroke 3, a single stroke 4, a single stroke 5, a single stroke 6, all the way up to, I don't know, 8 or 9, like a lot of them. We just have the 1. So did we just randomly invent it? Or did we take one of the many French ones? Well, we published it first, so we probably did invent it, except that maybe the French were using it and just didn't publish it anywhere that survived, and then we stole just like the one that we liked. I don't know. It's possible that single stroke 7 is American. The next one is the flam accent. So that one's kind of hard to tell. There are a lot of British manuals that don't actually have notation in them, and some of them may or may not have contained flam accent-like patterns. We really don't know. The first named flam accent, I believe, comes from the United States. It's not called a flam accent, it's called something else wacky. But there really isn't a British antecedent, but again, we don't really know. And of course, no one was calling it the flam accent for quite a while after its invention, so it's really hard to say. I'm going to say maybe it's American, but that one I'm not 100% on. The last one's a kind of a stretch, and I'll say that now, but the pataflafla. So obviously the name is not American. The name comes from France, and in France, it was like in the 1860s, they were playing cataflaflas, and then they changed the name to pataflafla, and then the Swiss picked it up sometime in the 19th century and called it bataflafla, and we got it, and we really didn't add it to our standard list of rudiments that we always play until like the 1960s or 70s. So it's fairly new to us, kind of, except that one time, way back in like 1810 or something, a rudiment called a flam and 2 strokes and 1 flam was published, which a flam, 2 strokes, and a flam, flam. That sounds exactly like what a pataflafla is. So we could have invented it first. We really didn't get it from ourselves. We really got it from the French or the Swiss, and even though we kind of already had it, it's just like it showed up once in the 1800s, and then there was like a 100-year gap, and then it showed up again. And it was really in no books in the middle. So you can take that with a grain of salt. So if you just want to think about the ones that are like for sure, not a theory, no speculation, is definitely American. You got the flamacue, you got the single paradiddle diddle, you got the dragadiddle, you got the flam drag, you got the triple paradiddle, and I think the drag paradiddle number 2. Like for sure, those 6 are like undoubtedly American. Then if you add all the other paradiddles and ratomacues in there, you get like 13. Then there's those 3 that could be, and it might be 16, could be 13, definitely at least 6, and any of that is more than 1. So the myth, the flamacue is the only American rudiment, definitely false by a factor of at least 6, if not a factor of 16. So, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.